Good evening, Brentwood family. We're nearing the end of our study of the letters of John. Just a couple of weeks left. Tonight we're in 2nd John. It's a very short book, only 13 verses, has a similar theme and purpose as the first book. In it, John is trying to refute some false teachers in the early church. But even though there's a similar theme, I believe we can get some new lessons and thoughts from these short verses that can have meaning in our lives this week. John starts out by introducing himself simply as the elder. Now, is this because he was formerly in the office of elder as we know it today? Well, as an apostle, he certainly could also be called an elder. Or was he referring to his advanced years that could have commonly identified him to various churches? We don't really know, but they knew who wrote the book when he simply called himself the elder. So start in verse 1 of 2nd John. The elder, to the chosen lady and her children, whom I love in the truth, and not I only, but also all who know the truth, because of the truth which lives in us and will be with us forever. Grace, mercy, and peace from God the Father and from Jesus Christ, the Father's Son, will be with us in truth and love. It has given me great joy to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as the Father commanded us. And now, dear lady, I am not writing you a new command, but one we have had from the beginning. I ask that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. As you have heard from the beginning, his command is that you walk in love. When he uses the term, the chosen lady and her children, he's apparently speaking to a church congregation and not to an individual. It was a common way to address a church. And as in 1 John, he repeats his comments about love. You remember when we talked a few weeks ago about what tradition says that when John addressed the church in his later years, he would be placed in a chair in front of the people. He would sit down and tell them, love one another. Now, he uses the word love 5 times in these first 6 verses. Sounds a little to me like the Beatles song from the 60s. All you need is love, over and over. However, I think the meaning of love has possibly blurred a little bit in our day as opposed to how John meant it. Let me ask you a question. Today, how do most people think we should treat each other when we tell them to love one another? Of course, there are a lot of ways to answer that question. And that possibly is the problem with saying we should love one another. It means many different things to many people, doesn't it? However, throughout the New Testament, not least in the teaching of Jesus himself, love was never meant to mean one of the main things which it has come to mean today, tolerance. Some today would say you should never say anything is actually wrong. That's unloving. You should never say either that one way of doing things is right. That's arrogant. If John had taken that position, he would not have said the words he says in the next verses, starting in verse 7. Many deceivers who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh have gone out into the world. Any such person is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch out that you do not lose what you've worked for, but that you may be rewarded fully. Anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever continues in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you, does not bring this teaching, do not take him into your house or even welcome him. Anyone who welcomes him shares in his wicked work. So we see here first, John commends the church for walking in the truth. But then he warns them. There are deceivers out there. He's pretty harsh when he talks about them, isn't he? The Christians should not even welcome them into their homes. In those days, they didn't have hotels like we do today. In practice, when these preachers traveled the countryside, they would stay with a local family. John says, if you allow them to stay in your home, you are a part of their wicked work. And I think this is a warning to us as well today. It's up to each of us to test what we're being taught and see if it's the truth. John said in his first book, in chapter 4, dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they're from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Paul said in his first letter to the Thessalonians, test everything, hold on to the good, avoid every kind of evil. Who are these false teachers that John is referring to? Well, he says they came out from us. They were members of the church body who were teaching these untruths. And the members John is addressing in this book, they didn't see them as unknown individuals as we might. They knew who he was talking about. It was very personal. Well, it's up to each of us today to study and know the truth. As it says in 2 Timothy, do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a workman who does not need to be ashamed and who correctly handles the word of truth. It's sometimes easier for us to listen. Let me say this one more time to put emphasis on this. It's sometimes easy for us to listen to those we respect and simply take it as truth. Even though we don't intend to, we sometimes put our elders and ministers on a pedestal, don't we? Now, some of that is much deserved. Paul also told Timothy, the elders who direct the affairs of the church well are worthy of double honor, especially those whose work is preaching and teaching. Our elders and ministers are certainly worthy of that double honor. They work countless hours selflessly, and all too often don't get appreciation from us as members. I fear that sometimes they feel they just get criticism. And that's up to us to show them how much we appreciate them and how much we love them for what they do. On the other hand, we should also not forget that they're human and just as susceptible to temptation as we are. Over the years, I've seen many instances where a church leader has fallen in one way or another, and not only were they led away by Satan, but also others who looked up to them fell away. It's very sad. John is reminding the church they should walk in obedience to God's commands. Christ is our only faultless example. Humans will disappoint us. We disappoint each other, don't we? These early Christians knew the false teachers to whom John is referring as actual people. They may have liked them, or they may have respected them. But John, while telling them to love one another, also calls out these false teachers and says, don't have anything to do with them. John then ends his letter with something that is appropriate to us today. In 2 John, verse 12, the very end of the of the book, he says, I have much to write to you, but I do not want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face so that our joy may be complete. Let me ask you something. Are you tired of video church? Are you tired of watching Wednesday Bible class on video? I sure am. This past year, Zoom and YouTube have been invaluable to keeping us connected while we were forced to stay apart as we tried to stay healthy and get rid of COVID. But enough is enough. Many years ago, I'll tell you this story. Many years ago, all of our telephones were hardwired in our homes. I know this is hard to imagine, but as part of our phone bills, there was something called long distance charges. We actually had to pay for each and every minute of a call that was made outside our area. I know this is ancient history. The main phone company, Bell, had advertisements to encourage people to call loved ones long distance. And these ads had a slogan, the next best thing to being there. Long distance is the next best thing to being there. Well, this is what Zoom and YouTube are, the next best thing. But this would mean the best thing is actually being there. Thankfully, we're rapidly approaching the time when we can return to a more normal form of worship that God wants from us, together, face to face. I'm so thankful we're back to worshiping together on Sunday mornings. I'm also excited at some of the announcements recently from the CDC regarding masks. So we're getting there. The Hebrew writer said, "Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." This is more than just a good thing to do. We are social creatures, and we need to be together and not just digitally. My business is pet retail. Many people would say that physical brick and mortar stores are needless and they're going the way of the buggy whip. Now, certainly a lot of the retail business is going online. In the early days of the pandemic, the percentage of online business skyrocketed for us and everybody around the country. As time went on and things started settling down, we saw customers began to flock back to the stores. They wanted that human contact. Now, e-commerce is still a significant portion of the business, but physical face-to-face sales are still the vast majority of the overall industry. Our worship is the same. We cannot get the same mutual encouragement and love by watching video church or video Bible class. We must get back together, and I think we're heading that way in a more fully together way very soon. That's why I cherish each of the increasing actual gatherings we have as we move forward. Last Sunday night, we shared a meal in the FLC for about 40 or 50 of us, I believe. And that was great. I know some of the home groups are meeting in person and even sharing meals together again. And it's just, it's a wonderful thing and doesn't compare with video home group. Now, next week, we'll finish with 3 John and we'll have some concluding comments. So thanks for listening to The Next Best Thing to Being There. Have a good week.